This one's for the Lake George Park Commission and for Andy Cuomo and the New York State Department of Environmental spoofs and tomfooleries. Ladies and gentlemen, when you let a whole bunch of water out of a toilet, you're flushing it. And when you're dumping a whole bunch of water out of Lake George, you're diluting the pollution in the lake. Now, Kathy Bozzoni and RPI University, when you're letting a whole bunch of water out of Lake George up there at the Lachute River, you're flushing sewage. You see David Wick and Roger Smith at Lake George Park Commission. I've got the records of the sewage dilution flushing practices of New York State on the Lachute River. The diluting of the sewage is something that's been going on for decades. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you're doing the wintertime lake flushing, you're diluting the pollution in Lake George. Now, that one needs to go down in the books of the smartest lake in the world that the Darren Freshwater Institute and the Fund for Lake George are passing off as Lake George pristine waters. They're trying to protect the pristine waters of Lake George. Well, to the attorneys that represent New York State and the attorneys that represent the Fund for Lake George and the Lake George Association, DEC at Raybrook, and especially Darren Freshwater Institute, Lake George does not have pristine water, and you can say whatever the hell you want to, you're flushing the lake. You've been flushing the lake to dilute the pollution for decades, and ladies and gentlemen, in this day and age of deadly viruses, this day and age of COVID-19 and SARS, COVID-2 and Legionnaire's disease and West Nile virus, and I can go on all day long, from typhoid to meningitis. When you have a lake that is being polluted by 6,000 septic systems all around the lake basin, draining from the bedrock into the lake, and then of course you've got all that sewage coming out of the malfunctioning sewage treatment plants of Lake George Village and all the other malfunctioning sewage treatment plants all over the lake. You've got a mess in Lake George, and it's not called pristine waters. So to Letitia James, the Attorney General for the state of New York, I would suggest that this Protecting Pristine Waters campaign and luring and baiting tourists and vacationers to come up and go swimming in the pristine waters of Lake George, it's nothing but a pile of fraudulent advertising. I mean, Letitia James, don't you have laws about false advertising promoting tourism in New York State? Pristine waters on Lake George. Boy, there's a good one. Now, to sum this one up for all my friends and family that know me very well, all those marine engines, you know, the outboards, the inboards, the inboard outboards, they're all water cooled, and they take combustion gases in a water cooling jacket for the engines, and they spew all this contaminated exhaust water into the lake. This is why Lake George has a high level of mercury and a high level of things like toluene and lead. It's the marine engines. And if you have any problems with my science, get a hold of Tony DePace up there at Chicks Marina in Bolton. And then, of course, get a hold of George Penzel. And we can get a hold of the State University of New York at Cortland. And we can get State University of New York at Plattsburgh. Oh, and especially the State University of New York at Glens Falls, Queensbury on Bay Road. And we'll discuss how vastly contaminated the waters of Lake George actually are, especially from the exhaust systems of all those marine engines. Now, folks, I'm going to leave it right there. Final comment. David Wick. You know, Project Monarch and Paperclip and MK Ultra, where the United States imported a bunch of Third Reich Nazi scientists into New York State. You can lie and try to cover up all you want to, David Wick, but the Lake George Park Commission flushes Lake George. That wintertime water drawdown, there's a lot more to that drawdown, Mr. Wick, than you'd believe. You see, Mr. Wick, I got an education too. And one of the most fascinating parts of my education was actually growing up on the waters of Lake George. This is the son of the Swamp Fox, ladies and gentlemen. Look up The Poisoning of America, the poisoning of Lake Champlain, the flushing of Lake George. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it right there, and as always, hasta la vista. God bless, and you betcha, the old Swamp Fox is coming back.